the smartest way to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. So, can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time? The answer is yes, if you fall into any of these 5 categories. 1. A new lifter. 2. If you're overweight or obese. 3. You're a detrained athlete. 4. You're an enhanced athlete. And 5. A suboptimal trainee. You probably fall in any one of these 5 categories. Let me explain. Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Diamonds and I'm the founder of Sculpt by Science. I've been training and dieting for 9 years. In that time, I've successfully been able to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, and I've done it twice, and that is in my health and fitness journey, using a science-based approach. Once in 2018, and in this case I fell into category 2, and the second time more recently in 2022, where I fell into category 3. As a detrained athlete, I'm primed to build a lot of muscle very quickly due to a phenomenon called muscle memory. I started at 202 pounds and sat at 181 pounds at the end and lost 20.2 pounds of fat and regained all my muscle tissue and then some. In this video, I'll be getting help by the world's #1 bodybuilding coach, Calum Raistrick. He's taken 164 athletes to take first place, 305 athletes to place in the top 3 in competitive bodybuilding shows, 46 overall championships. He's turned 15 people into IFBB Pros and 2 Olympia Wins. Today, you'll have me and one of the best in the game to show you exactly what you need to do to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. But before we dive in, a lot of research and editing goes into making a video like this. Just do me one favor, if you wouldn't mind, gently tap the like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. And if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe and hit the notification bell if you're new. Let's kick it off. Calum, in your experience, as a natural athlete, who do you believe can achieve body recomposition, and is it common?
So by body recomposition, we're referring to the, that sweet spot of being in a position where we can mobilize body fat and also start to add lean mass, almost simultaneously. So I think there's probably 2 situations where that will be apparent. And in a natural athlete who are working with their own hormonal profile and the body's ability to optimize the environment they're in. And this is something that you see with new trainees all the time. And when you first start training in the first place properly, you see this massive rate of progression that will eventually diminish over time. But when you start putting those things in place at first exposure, it accumulates and happens very, very quickly. And I think you'll see that within a lot of new trainers, that they might have been dabbling with training and nutrition in the first place, but then day one of them really being diligent and meticulous with what they're doing in terms of their sleep, their nutritional accuracy, what they're doing with their training, the whole full spectrum of their lifestyle optimized towards their goals. Mm-hmm. So instead of if you're a new trainer, 100%, that novel response and body recomposition is definitely a thing. Mm-hmm. And as a business and as a coaching company, we work with a lot of elite level athletes who are also enhanced, and you also see a very similar thing with that situation where, because you've got control of that hormonal environment they're in, you can kind of optimize and wrap things up in a way where it creates a very unique and novel response when you're first implementing those tools. But even with that situation, once they've been doing it for a period of time, it does start to diminish in terms of response.
So we're saying new trainees, first time in the gym, and would you classify someone who's gone in the gym for a 6-month stint, gone off for another 6 months, 2 years later they try again, and they say, hey, I'm really going to train. Would you consider that person a new trainee as well?
I think there is definitely a certain level of detraining which occurs, right, if the stimulus has not been there for a long period of time. And you do see this a lot with even high level natural athletes or enhanced athletes, where they've taken a year or 2 years out of the sport and they may not have trained that much or at all in that time frame. Like, once they start returning to the habits and the protocols they were doing previously, the response happens very, very quickly. And that's where this whole notion of this is muscle memory, that blanket term of muscle memory, but you're essentially just putting the body back into the groove where response is going to be maximized.
One of the best things I've ever done in my entire life is getting a coach that will get me to the destination that I want to without any speed bumps and giving me a direct path. And that's exactly what I do for my clients. James McGee, at over 60 years old, thought that his age was stopping him from seeing his results. He's retired, was a busy professional, and the one thing he never sorted out and was never allowed to be able to see was his six-pack. And in 16 weeks, I changed that around. I figured it out. I listened to him. I diagnosed his situation. We jumped on a call, and I truly saw what was holding James back. Tori had been training for years, and after our conversation, I built him the entire program. I coached him through it. We had coaching calls. We spoke over WhatsApp, and I guided him step by step through the 16 weeks. And Tori is now a men's physique champion. We went through the entire process together because I have been there myself. If you're a busy professional, you've never been able to see your six-pack, or you want to get into the shape of your life at least once, and you feel now is the time you're ready, you're working hard, but you're just not seeing the results, you're working hard but not smart, I can help you. All you need to do is go into the description of this video, go through the application, give me as much information there as possible, honest information. I will jump on a call with you, or maybe even Tori, and I'll see how I can help you, and I'll diagnose your situation, and we'll get the exact same results that you're seeing, and it's guaranteed. I'm excited to be working with you, but with that being said, go into the description, fill out the application, and I'll see you on the other side. Let's get back to the video. And with that, Calum, it's such a, I would say it's a difficult thing to track. What are things you're looking for? What are things you're tracking to truly see if we are achieving recomposition over, let's say, a 4 or 5 month period?
So like if we were working with a client online and you wouldn't have access to seeing them physically in person, then we're still using the lower hanging fruit there in terms of metrics to track. So you've obviously got when you're looking at physiques, one of the biggest things that you'll refine over time is just the ability to use your eye for what's happening with physique analysis, and then based on that objective review of what's happening visually, you're then just cross-referencing the other metrics with that. So I'd look at what's happening visually to the eye, and then I would cross-reference that with scale weight trends, and we might be using certain circumference measurements, and we might be using then on the check-in just biofeedback across the week, and what's happening in terms of logging their training and performance trends with their training and recovery trends with their training, and then all the lifestyle stuff, the sleep stuff, the biometric stuff with tracking, blood pressure regulation, resting heart rate, all the things that are going to be intertwined with the nervous system. And if you compact all those things together, we've got a pretty accurate way of seeing where direct body composition is going. But because we're looking at the metrics everywhere else in terms of how your body's recovering, performing, we can also just preempt what's going to happen ahead as well. So if I know that these metrics are trending in a poor manner and they're getting worse over time with sleep quality or stress management, I can preempt the fact that I'm probably going to have to pull you back in the near future to reset that so we can get back into a productive place. Whereas if we're in a position where like you recently moving out there and you're like, look, my sleep's much better now, I feel better, my routine's a lot more dialed in, I know that that's going to be ahead of us is going to be a really good run of progress now. Whereas if it was the opposite and you said, look, sleep's really poor at the moment, I'm getting 4 hours a night, I'm highly stressed, that would be just a preempting decision over, this is not a time where I can really try and drive progress aggressively. The environment you spend your time in and the kind of the efficiency of what you're doing on all levels makes a big difference as well.
So would you say those environmental factors play an as equally big role as the training and nutrition?
Yeah, for sure. The environment an individual's in is huge, because it's going to impact where you are psychologically, it's going to impact recovery, it's going to impact just you become, I'm a big believer with, especially with athletes at a higher level, you almost become the nature and the characteristics of the environment you're in the individuals you associate yourself with. And it's the same within business, it's the same within coaching. Like, if you want to take yourself to the next level or expand or evolve, you need to be around the people that will help facilitate that and support you there. And it's the same thing from an athlete's perspective. If the environment is not conducive to their goal, then you are going to see that in their progress. And if you don't at the start, it will eventually, rear its head at some point later down the line.
But if someone were to ask you right now, hey Cal, what macro split is the best for me to follow to at least maintain my muscle tissue, if not try and grow, and also lose fat at the same time, what would you suggest?
Protein first, dietary fat requirements being sufficient, and then carbohydrates almost fill the rest of the gap, so to speak. And carbs, like macronutrient partitioning and carb exposure or carb intake, is going to be very relative to the individual. Like, we know when it comes to managing body composition that energy balance is very much a caloric driven variable. It's like calorie intake is going to have a huge impact on overall compositional management. But we're also in a position where when we look at an individual on a deeper level, if we've got someone who is extremely stressed, extremely overweight, highly insulin resistant, are we in a position where giving them 70% of their daily intake from carbohydrate, is that an efficient way of managing this? And there's two schools of thought there. And this is where an advanced coach would look at this and approach it in the right manner. There's one school of thought where it's like, they're insulin resistant, carbohydrates are bad for this individual, I need to put them on a protein and fat dominant diet. And it's like, there's nothing, it will work if the calorie intake is aligned. But then on a deeper level, the more advanced coach, especially within in that kind of Gen Pop demographic, body transformation demographic, would see that individual and go, why are they overweight in the first place? And if I give them a protein fat diet, are they going to be able to adhere to that? Because the individual has lived off carbohydrates for years and years and years, okay? And that's why they're in the position they're in now. So although they've got this level of insulin resistance and they're carrying a lot of adipose tissue, the bigger picture for me to start the process is, right, I'm going to set them a step target. I'm going to get them to improve their sleep quality and start to rebalance this hormonal environment. I'm going to set them a calorie target, and they can have as many carbohydrates as they want in that calorie target, as long as they're adhering to tidying up nutritional choices to make them a little bit more nutrient dense and making sure they're not exceeding that calorie target in the first place and hitting a minimum protein requirement. And then what happens when they start losing weight? Well, now insulin resistance starts to diminish.
Is there a percentage that you would typically allocate, or a range you would allocate towards fats? And then, as you've mentioned, the rest would typically go to carbohydrates. Do you have a range in mind for those two major metrics?
So I'd usually use, regardless of caloric amount, I'd usually use protein at 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound, which would be absolutely plenty in terms of where the kind of daily requirements would be from a protein synthesis standpoint in terms of stimulation. And then, we can delve into the hierarchy of order there in terms of, right, what's the relevance of meal timing and frequency there in terms of MPS signaling and, the bigger picture. But macronutrients and energy balance from calorie manipulation is the bigger picture, is the lower hanging fruit. And if you've got that protein foundation, then wherever their caloric requirements are, for most individuals, if they were going to work with this kind of sustainability approach to nutrition and having a dietary protocol that allows for optimizing well-being at the same time as delivering results. Because if we're on a super low calorie diet, then some of these macronutrients are going to be in a suppressed state for a period of time. It's not a long-term thing, but dietary fat between that 20 to 30% range of total caloric intake is going to be a pretty safe bet there. So if they're on, if you've got, 1,000 calorie diet, obviously hypothetically, it's not going to be 1,000 calories likely, but, you're going to have somewhere around 250 to 300 calories worth of dietary fat within that. And then the rest will be protein at that body weight metric, 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound. And then the rest of the calories from that can just come from carbohydrates. So once you've worked out protein requirements and fat requirements, you can then just allow carbohydrates to fill the rest of the gap.
So for sure, I wanted to ask you about frequency or training more so for recomposition. I know training with you, it's been the first time I've ever trained till failure. Very, very intense. Would you recommend that for Gen Pop in terms of their style of training?
At the start, no. So like if we look at the bigger picture for what it's going to take for those individuals who are relatively detrained to drive adaptation, it's using the same analogy of like if we had someone like yourself who was looking at driving more muscle mass on your frame, what it takes you to build lean tissue is very different to what it takes you to maintain lean tissue.
Right.
So the level of stimulus you need to build new muscle is going to be much higher than the level of stimulus you need to just maintain the current muscle you have. And when you're looking at an individual who is detrained and doesn't have that past training experience and has that exposure to that training stimulus, adding in anything on the spectrum is going to drive certain levels of adaptation. So whether they're training to, perceive 4 reps in reserve or 1 rep in reserve, you're still driving those adaptations because it's completely novel stimulus.
Right.
And to the point where it's at the start, it's probably irrelevant to load as well. I think once an individual gets to a point where they've been training for 3, 4, 5, 6 months plus, you're going to have to get to a metric of, if you look to whether you are doing this off it's very hard to do, but whether you were doing this off a perceived 1 rep max on a given exercise or just a perceived percentage of intensity, you'd probably need to be somewhere in that kind of 65-70% up range for you to be in a sweet spot for driving hypertrophy and driving adaptation, sufficient intensity and difficulty. But the proximity to failure, we know, as long as the bigger picture is allowing for adaptive response to occur from workload or volume increasing over time, that actual proximity to failure could hover between, anywhere between 4 reps in reserve to failure, as long as the bigger trend is the volume and the workload being tolerated is increasing over time.
And then my next question for you, just to speed through these, your top 3 supplements that you would recommend for body recomp.
So I would say top 3 supplements, probably number 1 if they are training would be creatine monohydrate, which is a funny one to say first, but if we look at even from an athlete perspective all the way down to Gen Pop clients, your ability to resynthesize ATP and the ability that's going to have on work capacity and training performance is huge. So if we can top that up and just keep that saturated, it's going to have a positive impact on your ability to drive that adaptive response in training in the first place, energy uptake and performance in general. The second would be, you could go down 2 schools of thought. So you could go down the nutritional route with something that you would probably see neglected in most dietary protocols, like essential fatty acids, omega-3, like EPA, DHA, for the health benefits of what that's going to do to recovery in the hormonal environment. You could go down nutritional deficiencies just with like a basic, multifaceted mineral and vitamin complex just for nutritional requirements as a foundation. Or you could just go down the route of the relevance of sleep quality on recovery and performance and something within that evening window to maximize sleep quality as well. So like if somebody was like highly stressed and they had, a lot of screen exposure, that's, we know that retinal stimulation and a lot of blue light exposure that, we're very common to as online coaches is going to have a quite crippling effect on the limbic system. Like the pineal gland in the limbic system by the hypothalamus is the gland that produces melatonin. And when you've got a lot of screen exposure, which is why you see some people with these weird orange glasses, the blue light blockers, when you've got a lot of screen exposure, it diminishes melatonin production. And melatonin influences a neurotransmitter is hugely important for maximizing sleep quality. So somebody that has, a lot of office hours and screen exposure and is highly stressed, I'd actually say melatonin would be quite a key part of getting them kind of rewired into a better pattern with their sleep. So you could go down lots of routes there. There's not like it would be relative to the individual, if that makes sense, in terms of picking the 3.
The best cardio to build muscle and lose fat, if you recommend one piece of machine or one practice, what would that be?
Use the cardiovascular work as a metric to manage energy balance in a way that allows for fat loss. So like instead of viewing your workouts as calorie expenditure, which is going to ramp up fat loss, I'd view your actual training sessions as progressive sessions to either hold tissue in a deficit or build muscle mass in a growth phase, in a surplus. And your cardiovascular work uses a metric to allow for better caloric expenditure and greater caloric deficit exposure to then mobilize fat loss. So it just fits within the framework of, here's your diet, here's your direct cardio, here's your, you know, your NEAT count, your steps, and use those three variables in combination with each other to drive that response overall. So, you know, if you're looking at lean tissue retention, maybe keep the intensity down a little bit in those cardio sessions, something non-glycolytic, something in that kind of 120 to 140 beats per minute threshold. If you're looking at something with more energy expenditure over a shorter period of time, and it's something a little bit more intense or interval based, which is like 160 to 180 BPM, just understand that, you know, you can't sustain that for long periods of time, and it's better used in short bursts. But it will be more expensive in terms of tissues having to work harder and potentially, you know, getting closer to the line of if it's mismanaged tissue loss because you're under recovering. It's not because it's burning into muscle, it's just because you're under recovering across the week because that variable's there. And I'd also say one thing on the cardio front, if you're looking at maximum efficiency for fat loss, understand that we want to be approaching the cardio in a non-glycolytic manner. So looking at the energy systems that cardio is targeting, if you're going super intense, what's the first thing that's being mobilized when you go into those energy systems? It's the glycogen that goes first, and then fatty acids will be mobilized, and that will be what drives the oxidation. If you're looking at just tapping into those fatty acids and maximizing oxidation, it's actually a slightly lower intensity, which is going to be more efficient there. So you know the typical, like, you know, health spa mums in their 40s who are like addicted to spin classes and stuff like that, and they're like, I just can't seem to lose any weight. It's because they're not in a deficit and they're doing the spin classes, which is just burning off the carbs they ate the day before. So you're not actually tapping into any efficient ranges for fat loss there, just because it's constant, just high intensity output. If we want to be retaining maximum lean mass and tapping into those ranges that we want to be maximizing fat loss, then maybe a slightly slower, more methodical approach is best.
So we're talking walking, anything that's low impact, anything that will keep your heart rate, let's say, below 140 overall.
Yeah, like 120 to 140 is the sweet spot for me. Yeah.
Big thank you to you.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Have a good one, Calum.
Cheers, brother.
And I hope you enjoyed the video. Calum is incredible at what he does, and so is his team. If you want to find any of Calum's information, I have put it in the description of this video as well as in the comment section. If you have any questions for me about how to build muscle and lose fat, ask me in the comments. If you've ever wanted to get a direct answer from me, I am there in the comments, especially right when the video's finished. So I'm there for you. I'm sure any other member of this channel will be able to reply to you, so don't be afraid. Like, smart people ask questions, so ask in the comments. If you did enjoy the video, leave it with a gentle thumbs up. I'll greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.